Hello, and welcome to the Mike Show. Today we have a very special guest. She's a streamer, YouTuber, and guest on a lot of different podcasts. I find her conversations with people to be very, very interesting and intriguing. A lot of the conversations she has regard mental health and relationships and topics that I just feel are not really explored enough in the streaming world. And so without further ado, please welcome notsoErudite.
Ready.
Cool.
We're live.
Awesome.
It's done.
Well, thanks so much for agreeing to do this first off. I really appreciate it. And I really enjoy your content. I think you have a very unique voice in the streaming world. A lot of streamers and stuff, I feel like kind of just do one thing. And I feel like what you do with like talking about mental health and relationships is like a very enriching thing to the space. I would love to kind of explore how you got into this world. Like, were you a big like Twitch streamer fan and you're like, I want to do this, or you just kind of...
No, not at all. I never watched Twitch streams ever. I still don't watch them that much, to be fully clear. I'm more of like a YouTube consumer. How did I get into this? It was kind of a long-winded story of essentially I was working for I was program directing a mental health program. That's still kind of in the works. The tech side's now just cleaning it up, but it's called Mental Help. I came up with the name. It's not very creative, but it is what it is. So yeah, I started with a company called Mental Help, and social media was a really integral part of it. I had a social media manager. They weren't quite doing what we needed them to do. They ended up leaving, and I was like, I'll just try taking it over for now while we wait and try to find somebody. Things kind of got scuffed. I kept doing TikToks and all this sort of stuff. And then I started playing around on my private TikTok to see what works on the algorithm, basically. And my TikToks took off and my works did not. But unfortunately, all the TikToks that were taking off were like the spicy stuff, which was what I was fearing. I was like, oh man, I'm pretty sure the main mental health stuff that's going to be popular is going to be like really like spicy stuff. So yeah, that is what took off. Got into TikTok. And then I was like, basically my husband's like, why don't you try like streaming a little bit? You might be able to like make some money. Give it a shot. If you don't like it, you don't have to do it. So I did some live streams on TikTok. That was super fun. Then I did a couple of live streams on Twitch. And then my husband's like, there's a streamer named Destiny, and he like basically will talk to anyone as long as you're interesting enough. So you should tell him what you do for work. And he sent me a couple of conversations Stephen had with other psychology people that I was not super happy about. And I emailed him and he said yes. And I kind of just took off. I went from like 200 followers. I basically in 3 days went from 0 to 2,000 followers on Twitch.
Wow.
And so I was like, well, you basically, when you win the lottery, you may as well like go forward. It seemed like an opportunity that so few people get that, like, why would I ever like not do this? Hold on. Sounds like I'm muted on my side. I'm just going to check and see why that's the case.
No worries. No worries.
Oh, just my computer fully reset everything. There we go. Wow. Everyone says, wow, much content. Much content indeed, guys. Sorry about that. I don't know why. Everything's just scuffed on my side.
But we'll send you the audio for that too.
Awesome. Sorry about that.
All good. All good.
Clearly, I'm not very good at this shit still. Lucky but not talented is my magic.
No, I mean, I think
right.
Like the tech side of things is like a lot less important than like the content side, in my opinion. Because I've worked with a lot of streamers and YouTubers, and oftentimes like they're just like their focus is we need to get new cameras and lights and audio, and it's like, well, maybe you should focus a little more on the content you're making, and then we can like polish it and make it all fancy. So I think that's
true. I'm not sure if I bring quality content either, to be honest. I still don't really know what I'm doing half the time. But people seem to be enjoying it and it's kind of fun. So yeah. So basically I took off after talking with Steven, and I've been kind of leaning into it. I didn't really know what I was doing. It took me a couple of months to actually like get a goal with this. And so now I have a goal, and my goal is basically I really want to promote good psychological information, promote good thinking, and talk about men's mental health and like kind of dating and relationship needs. So that's kind of like my main interests, is to reach the incels and defeat pop psych single-handedly. Those are my two goals in life.
That's a very admirable goal, I would say. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
the mental
Yeah.
health thing especially is just so important in this space. Yeah. So you said you do watch some like YouTubers. What kind of content do you like to watch?
So the main stuff I actually watched before this was Abba and Preach. They were like my main YouTube channel that I've really enjoyed. Um, it's just a mixture of like comedy, and I found it very helpful to understand like how men think in relationships and dating. I think a lot of women have like incorrect conceptions of it, one way or the other. Like I come from Christian land, so I think I had a very like naive kind of Hollywood version of like men and masculinity, whereas I think a lot of women maybe have like the opposite. But I found it really helpful, like every time like Abba would like watch a Jubilee video and he would predict like exactly what was going to happen. And it would always be like the opposite of what I was expecting. I was like, fuck, like I don't know anything clearly. Like I'm wrong every single time, especially about like the men. So yeah, those were like my main, the main people I watched. I used to love John Oliver like a long time ago, but I don't watch him as much anymore. And then my husband got me watching a bit of Destiny stuff, but to be honest, I've watched way more of his content since I've been in his space. And so now that I'm in this space, I watch quite a bit of content compared to before. I was a big podcast documentary nerd before.
Oh, cool. What kind of podcasts?
Yeah. I love, there's like a science podcast. I'm pretty sure it's just called like the Science Podcast or something like that. It's really creative.
Nice. They're as good as naming as me.
Yeah, there's a podcast called like It's Gonna Kill You or something like that. It's about like viral disease and stuff like that. It's run by
wow.
two girls. One's like a microbiologist and one's like a med student or something like that. So I listened to like a lot of science heavy stuff. I loved Vsauce. That was another YouTube I really liked to listen to. And then true crime podcasts as well. I seem to really enjoy. And then nonfiction books. So I would like listen to like Jonathan Haidt and other nonfiction research heavy books. That's super interesting.
No, yeah, that's really cool, because I feel like you seem to come into the space with like a very academic like approach in a lot of ways. I mean, your name obviously, Erudite. By the way, would you prefer I could call you Erudite or Kyla?
Either or.
Okay.
Good with whichever.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm easy.
But yeah, it's very interesting because I find, especially like I recently saw you on the Fresh and Fit podcast, and like in a world where like it seems just like a bunch of people like yelling at each other and attacking. It's just, and then you just come in and like have this very thoughtful, like well thought out response, and it just, I find it kind of refreshing in this space. I mean, there's other content creators like I'm a big fan of Dr. K and like Jubilee is another really good one, but that kind of have a very similar approach. But I feel like it's very kind of needed in a time like this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to occupy this space of like, I'm a moderate kind of radical progressive. So I'm like a moderate who's not nice. Like, I'm not going to be nice to you. I'm going to stake out positions that just tend to be nuanced. And I call myself a moderate because depending on the topic that we're talking about, you're probably not going to be necessarily assume which side I'm going to fall on, because I tend to pull a little bit from like all sorts of positions. So yeah, that's the main thing I'd say that like makes me differ from like other kind of more moderates that you've like listed in the space, is that I'm not interested in being like nice. Whereas other moderates, that's kind of like the criticism, right? They play both sides and are just like nice and nice, and like I'm not interested in doing that. Yeah. So I'm a little bit spicier, but I'm not as spicy as Steven. So,
oh man, so I'm
a little bit more ad friendly.
My introduction to Destiny was I had a roommate who would stay up till like 6 a.m. every night, just yelling at people on the internet, and I had no idea what he was doing. And I found out over time that he was in Destiny's Discord in like one of these channels where people just debate. And one time he like unplugged his headphones so I could listen to it, and it just was mayhem. And I was like, oh my gosh.
I mean, his Discord is, it's a special place for sure.
I was like, I didn't realize like people just stayed up all night like yelling at strangers on the internet about stuff, and it was pretty cool to find out.
My Discord's a little more tame than that. Yeah, but Yeah, I mean, we still debate, but we have like certain rules. You can't be dumb, mean, and wrong. That's the rules of my
Mm.
Discord. At all three, you can't be all three at the same time. So you can be dumb and mean, you can be wrong and dumb, etc. But you can't be dumb, mean, and wrong all at the same time, or we're gonna be mean to you. Because honestly, you should be meaned at a little bit. Like it, and it's hard. It's hard to be all three at once. Like you've got to kind of be a special character to be dumb, mean, and wrong.
Right.
So yeah,
Wow.
that's kind of how we run our Discord, and yeah.
So as you've grown in the space, like obviously you're like posting a lot on YouTube and all these different things. Have you like built up a creative team of like editors and producers, designers and stuff?
Yeah, so I've got kind of two editors, Contrast and Drake. So Contrast kind of headed up everything from like ground zero, kind of got everything to where we are today. And then, you know, he was so good that he got other jobs as well, which is super cool for him. So now we have another editor named Drake who's kind of taken over the main channel, and Drake Media, spelt with a JR, which is confusing and no one can ever say his name right. And so I've got two editors. We just made a contract with somebody who's going to be my head merchandiser. And we've got kind of like a bit of a tech head guy as well. So we kind of have people who started, a lot of them started voluntary, and then as we're like making ends meet, because right now it's like everyone thinks that like somebody like my size makes like really good money. We don't. For sure we don't. You need to be making like, you need to be like averaging like 500 to 600, I would suspect, before you're bringing in like a really solid monthly income.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, as we're growing and I can afford it, I am hiring more people, because I'm very much of the view of like, do what you're good at. I love small businesses, but my like biggest frustration when I've looked at like mom and pop shops that I think they do really stupidly, that I think really big companies do well, is they diversify like skill sets. So like if I have a thumbnail guy, right? So like my video editor's really, really good, but he's not super talented at thumbnails. Not like this artist is. So we pay the artist to do thumbnails and my video editor guy to do video editing. So we're really big on like kind of diversifying skill sets and kind of maximizing what people are good at. So like I'm really good at like talking and logistics. And so I do a lot of like talking, scheduling, logistics. I'm starting to do scheduling for my husband's work. Whereas he's like a big ideas guy. So he comes up with like lots of new ideas and new shows and stuff like that. And so we just try to like maximize everyone's strengths, because work should be fun. And I think work is funnest when you're like tapping into what you're best at.
Yeah, definitely. That's really interesting. And do you find these people like, are they, you said they volunteer, are these like just people in your community, or are they just like people that reach out? Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, most of them have been from my communities. I'm super lucky. I have, unironically, I can't boast enough about my Discord. I have a really cool Discord community. Probably this is maybe different than some streamers in the area, not all, but I've invested like a lot of energy into creating kind of me, my husband, and one of our like long-term friends for like 10 years. We're like the founders of our community. And we've really spent a lot of energy and time just like talking to people who drop in and really cultivating a good community, reaching out to like other small content creators that we see to like snag them from other communities and be like, be friends with us. And so we've got this super cool community where we'll like debate. But it's like most people come in and are like, wow, your Discord is both like really, really nice, but also like kind of mean, but always like mean in a good way. Like we're very big on like mean well. But fundamentally, if you fuck up, we see people with a margin of error. So like we've got like communists, like we really do have a diverse display of like worldviews in our community, but we actually like get along. We play board games together. We have like movie night together. And so from this, I've kind of been able to find people who are interested in this field to kind of come alongside me. And I'm very big on like, I hire people who don't ask to be hired usually. And that's been working out pretty well for us. So yeah.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah. So, a lot of your topics are about like mental health and like relationships. And I actually had a friend who like recently asked me a question. He posed this idea that I really wanted to like bounce off you, because he's kind of in this state where he's like really depressed and just like really working on himself. But at the same time, I can tell he really wants like a relationship. And his whole thing was like, he doesn't think he can have a relationship while he's figuring out all this stuff. And I was wondering, like, do you think that people struggling with mental health, it's still a good idea to like seek out relationships, or do you think it's like better to kind of work on yourself, build yourself up, and then go out there?
Like any answer I'll give, unsatisfactorily, it's nuanced. So
Yeah.
I would say if you're like the moderate to severe level of dysfunction from your mental illness, then yeah, you probably shouldn't be pursuing relationships because you should be dedicating like 6 to 8 hours every day trying to fix your mental health. Like really,
Mm-hmm.
really you should be dedicating. Like when you're at the severe level, so there's kind of this rule of thumb in therapeutic treatment, which says like the greater the symptom severity, the greater the interventions required, right? So if
Mm-hmm.
like you basically can't go to work, you can't maintain relationships, you can barely get out of bed, you don't need to worry about a girlfriend. You need to worry about like getting out of bed and showering and brushing your teeth, right? Anyone who's kind of in that moderate up to like mild, I would say like absolutely relationships can be on the table, but they shouldn't come they like the issue is you have to make sure that they don't cause your mental health like focus to become second priority. Otherwise, especially if you're somebody who's been severe in the past and you're kind of getting up to moderate, you don't want to like slip back down. So I think it's really complex. And then the final thing with that would be like make sure you're like selecting partners and relationships that are going to be good for your mental health, which is easy to say. And everyone's like, what does that mean? Like, what do you mean good for my mental health? So you mean like a healthy relationship? Because not like anyone's trying to be like in a toxic relationship. But if there are like yellow and red flags there, especially when you're like in the moderate to like mild, I would just say like just listen to all of them. Because like if you're depressed and anxious, it's going to cause like some level of like cognitive like um you're going to have like a lens coloring like your interactions with the world, so you might not like be fully reading things as well. And there's nothing worse in my mind than like forming a relationship through like trauma bonding. I think that's like that can be grounds for like a really really like that's typically relationships that like burn really fast, they get really intense really quickly, and they're really messy in their breakup because neither one of them is totally ready to let each other go even though it gets like super toxic. These are relationships that I think like obviously there are exceptions. Some relationships that start in trauma bonding end up amazingly well, and that's great for you, but it's not something I could recommend.
Oh, that's very insightful. Yeah. So you said when you first started out, you were like posting all these like, like kind of mental health factoids, and then but you also had some like content that was like spicy, and that's what really like took off. So
Mm-hmm.
how do you balance like, because I know you like interview a lot of people that kind of like hot topics, like Mr. Girl, Sneeko, all these kind of like spicy streamers. So how do you find the balance of like throwing in like relevant information and like helpful information, but also like trying to get those views? Like, do you try to use these like spicy streamers to push the information, or do you just kind of try to do both and see what sticks? Like,
Yeah. So I think one of the benefits that I have is I'm not pursuing streaming to like, I don't want to be famous.
mhm.
And the Twitch royalty drama has reinforced to me that I have no fucking interest in
Oh
like
man.
the upper echelons at all, right? Because I'm just like, a lot of times it does seem to be the case that like what is required to get you to the top, not always, because there are some really like high quality people at the top, but a lot of times it takes like some like pretty like seedy weird behavior. There's a lot of like manipulation that goes on, and I'm just not interested in that. And so what I'm trying to mostly do is figure out like how do I diversify my income enough from like what I have, because there's kind of like a bunch of different social media strategies. Devin Nash talks about this a fair bit, how like some people pursue like big numbers because big numbers just naturally means more income, because you just have like if everyone's spending $2 but there's like 10,000 of them, that's a really good income. But you can also focus on having like a more centralized like smaller group that invests a fair bit like more money and like time and energy into your content, and that can be another like strategy. So I don't know where I'm going to end up, because I think I'm just going to keep trying to create content that like matters to me and I think matters to people. Um, and that seems to be working so far, but I can't even begin to pretend like I've got this all figured out. Like I certainly don't. There's multiple days where I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to stream about. And like, I don't want to just do like garbage content. And so for me, I think the biggest thing is that like I don't really care about like being famous or anything. I really just like helping people. Like that's like my biggest thing is I just genuinely want to help people. And so when I'm looking at my content, some of it is like sometimes you can just like help people by like pulling them in through interesting conversations and getting them involved in our Discord. Because I think our Discord is actually like a really, really good space for a lot of people. Other ways that I could help people I've realized is like I've started making a couple of video essays on like kind of focused psych topics. Um, Other ways I can help people is like battling misinformation. But I've really realized this need with like men's mental health. So that's why I've been like leaning a lot into all of these shows and kind of doing a ton of content that are like dating shows and call-in shows and blah 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 and talking about men and gender relationships and all this stuff because it seems like there's a really really big need there. Um, so I don't know how I balance it precisely, but basically, like if people seem to be consuming the content to some extent, and I feel good about the content, that seems to be a pretty good measuring stick so far. If people are losing interest, it means it's probably not interesting enough. And if I feel yucky about it, then I don't really want to do it again. So that's kind of how I'm balancing it right now. But I feel yucky is a really bad prescription for other people to use, obviously.
So how do you know, or if something is losing interest but you feel the content is important, what do you do then?
I would probably just like pivot. So I was like doing some psych stuff for a while, and it seemed like it was really boring, like live stream reacting to psych stuff. People didn't seem to like it. So now I've pivoted to trying video essays. So I've written a couple, gonna see how those do. Because they're shorter, they're a lot more like consumable. And the editor who's doing it is just brilliant at adding like clips and making things super fun. So we're gonna try that and see if that works. And if it doesn't, then I would probably pivot and try something else. Hopefully that works so far. I don't know. I've been pretty lucky. It seems like a lot of the stuff that I try, I kind of like, I don't know. It's a lot of like throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks. And I've been lucky in that like a fair bit seems to be sticking. Like the call-in shows are pretty popular. My solo streams where I just do like Q&As are really, really popular. And people really love me on panels. So those three things seem to be working. So keep going with those for now.
Awesome. Yeah, I've found that to be a trending thing with the people I've talking to. It's like there's so much trial and error with especially new media. Like because I come from a film and television background, and it's like, yeah, we do have trial and error, but if you have trial and error with a $4 million movie, it's a lot bigger of a deal than like, oh, I threw a YouTube video out there and it didn't work, so I'll just try another one.
Yeah.
So yeah, that seems to be a very common theme.
It's a weird field, right? Because I came from like a very academic psych field, which is highly structured, right? Like my relationship with the clients is very clear. I'm in-house as a addictions counselor, right? My path to success is pretty clear. In school, it's study hard, do your papers and do your best, right? And do all the stuff that was required to be good at school. And then in the streaming world, you basically get to make up the rules. Which is super great for some people. I think that's why like people with like lots of like ADHD and like autism and stuff really can thrive in these spaces because they get to make up their own rules and they're not like boxed in by like more like neurotypical rules. But for somebody like me, it's also stressful because I'm very used to structure. Like I know how to succeed in academia. I know how to succeed in like professional career land. I was really fucking good at it. So this thing where I'm like avant-garde, just like make shit up and see what works is really weird, especially because you basically like somewhat have to like, because there's always that ethical question that you have to like go back to being like, well, this might be really right. I could like have interviews with like really mentally ill people and that shit would probably be really popular, but it feels yucky. I wouldn't be willing to do that. So it's like, it's so tricky.
Yeah, it seems really hard to balance that. So what is your academic background again? You studied counseling, correct?
No. So I got a honors psych degree. So I got an honors psych degree, which for those of you who don't know what that is, that's a Bachelor of Arts where all of the minor credits are dedicated to your major. So you do like an extra 12 to 15 credits just in psych. And then you also do like a thesis. So generally, actually at this point, it's recognized as basically like, you can be a scientist in two ways in psychology. You can get a master's in research psychology, or you can do an honors bachelor. So it's kind of like, it's not a master's, but it's more than a bachelor's, basically. And basically the minimum requirement for clinical psychology, because clinical psychology is more competitive than medical school. So yay.
Oh, yeah.
So I got that, and then I went back to school and I got a graduate diploma in psychometrics or psychological assessment. So that is delivering psychological tests to people, like IQ tests, neuropsych tests, forensic tests, stuff like that. And then I'm also a licensed addictions counselor. So I'm a psychometrist. I'm also a psychometrician because I've worked in designing tests like psychological measures, and I'm a licensed addictions counselor. And then hopefully next year I'll be in school for a master's in clinical psychology. So, yeah.
Do you anticipate like that will impact your streaming stuff? Do you think that like it'll be a little bit harder to balance that once you're in school full time, or is that why you're building like a team?
Yeah, that's part of why I'm talking. So I'm talking to right now. So the reason I'm not in school this year is that the prof who was going to take me wanted 1 year off without students, and the other one decided to go on sabbatical. So I've been talking with one of the profs. She's back at work. And so we're meeting Monday to talk about me maybe working in her lab this year so I can just get like really exposed to the lab. Hopefully that'll speed up my master's too, which would be fucking amazing. So I'm going to talk with her about that balance specifically because a lot of this you can now do from home. The main thing that's going to be an issue is, for example, like if I get like controversial and like people get angry at me and try to like contact my university or like cause issues there. So that's like the main thing that I'm kind of trying to keep in account and prep for. And there's not a lot of prep you can do for that other than like letting your supervisor know ahead of time and being like, hey, just so you know, this is kind of the nature of this world that I'm in. It would probably impact like video essays, for example, because I spend a fair bit of time researching them. I probably couldn't pump out video essays. Streaming wise, we'd have to see. Especially if I can get on panels that I'm like already doing in school for like research, that would be amazing. And I could also stream like, you know, if I spend an entire week like focused on like one of the theories of like rehabilitation of forensic clients, so like people in jail, I could do a stream just going over the research and like what we know about it. So I could probably find ways to tailor my school to my streaming.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, that's really interesting being able to combine those worlds because academia and like YouTube streaming is like usually never cross paths. I'm actually interviewing a woman next week who has a YouTube channel called The Morbid Zoo, where she does like video essays on like basically just analyzing movies. And she has like a doctorate in like English, but specializing in, I guess, movies. And so I was like, wow, that is so cool that you found a way to like, she's basically doing her YouTube channel as her thesis instead of like writing a bunch of 20-page papers. It's that's cool that you're like finding a way to combine those two worlds. So what are some of the like obstacles? Like, are there any like obstacles that you've like encountered? Like, I know when we emailed you, you mentioned like your sleep schedule is all out of whack because of streaming. Like, are there any things that like streaming and doing this YouTube is like you've had to find a balance with other than that?
I mean, for me, that avant-garde piece where like there isn't a clear path has been really difficult for me to adjust to. It's led to like a lot of like resting stress where like I don't know how to put down work. I'm constantly worried about work. And I don't know what to do with it like ever. That's a really weird thing to experience. It's weird to be, see, like I'm kind of like a golden child. So I have like a couple of things going on where like I'm used to like being pretty good at work. To the extent that I would definitely say that I attach my self-worth to it as well, right? Like if I'm not doing good at work, am I a good person? Like, yeah, I don't know, probably not, right? Like that's like my self-rhetoric. And so it's weird to be in a field where like it's really hard to measure if you're doing good because there's a mixture of like people who like are successful in streaming. Some of it is like pure just work. Like they just work really hard. They get a really good show. It's amazing. Other people, I don't know. I guess they're lucky. I'm not really sure. And so it's like, it's hard to know. It's hard to measure, like, is this going well? So like people ask me like, how did you feel about stream? And I'm like, I don't know. I guess we'll find out in like 3 or 4 days when the YouTube video comes out and I see the comments, like, who knows if it went well. So that's a really weird obstacle that I didn't expect that leads to like a lot of like resting stress for me. Because there's always something that I could be doing, but also what should I be doing? What direction should I go? So I get sometimes like frozen I get like frozen with the amount of like infinite options available to me.
Mm.
Where I like sit down to do work and I'm like, I could be scheduling calls. I could be reaching out to other streamers to collab. Could be working on a video essay. I could be trying to maybe plan an IRL stream. What should I do?
Yeah.
There's no clear answer. I just have to pick. So that's been unexpectedly stressful for me. Analysis paralysis is what Sony says. Yes. The streaming, sleeping schedule has been a little bit scuffed, but I can't even blame streaming. It's mostly me. The issue is I stopped streaming at like 10 to 11. It's really hard to turn your brain off in the next like hour or two. Like I would like to end my stream and then go to bed within an hour, but 12 rolls around and I'm just like hyped and excited and like wanting to do shit. And it doesn't feel like I've had my leisure that day yet because I've been like waiting to stream all day. So that's been kind of an unexpected obstacle, is just like not being able to shut my brain off and just like go to sleep. Yeah.
What other things do you like do in your free time? I mean, you said you like read and.
Yeah, leisure-wise, gym is a really big one for me. So we spend way too long at the gym. We're not the most focused because I go with my husband and our roommate, and then sometimes one of our neighbors comes too. So it's like sometimes it's like 2.5 hours at the gym. It's way too long. But it's super fun. Spending a lot of time with friends in general seems to be my main form of leisure. And then honestly, like hanging out in my Discord. And then if I'm really like peopled out, I'll usually like take my dog on a walk. And then sometimes I'll just play like a game by myself. Just to like kind of turn off my brain. I've been really into Arc again recently. I'm on a very big Arc bend. So I've been playing a lot of that.
Oh, nice. So you do a little gaming too.
Yep.
Oh, nice. Real Twitch.
I'm not good, but I do play. Yes.
So a lot of these relationships in your Discord, because a lot of like really, really big streamers have these relationships and it's very parasocial, but it sounds like a lot of these relationships you're building are, two ways in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's really weird. I've heard some streamers say like they try to never spend time in their community because they're worried it's going to make things like more parasocial. Every community that I've seen do that is usually infinitely more parasocial. I try to spend a lot of time in my community, and obviously like there's some level of parasociality. First of all, parasociality isn't inherently bad. Like being a fan of somebody isn't bad. It's just bad if A, I weaponize it against you, and B, if you like stop functioning in the rest of your life and then decide that I'm your wife and like stop pursuing any other outside relationships. Like obviously like these are bad things, but it's like it's not even the parasociality at that point. It's like the delusionality that's the problem. Yeah, I've just formed a lot of like friendships with my community as well. So like maybe there is some element of parasociality that like maybe they feel more of a friend with me than I do with them. That might be like one risk. But I appreciate that in my community. Actually, my community laughs. My Discord members hardly even, they come into my community and then they stop watching my content because they like my community more, and they just don't actually like. So many of my regulars in the Discord just never watch my content. So, which is super weird. Like, it's just like, why are you here? Like, what are you doing? But it's kind of a good thing, right? It means that like we're doing something right with the community. Because that's my dream. My dream is literally like, if I could pull people into a community and they could meet like one person who becomes their best friend, like that's enough for me. And I think I've done that multiple times now. So, yeah.
Have you had any like weirdos like coming in and calling you their wife?
Yeah, there's one guy who's decided that like me, but it's not just me. He's like in his mind, he's wife with like 3 other female streamers. So
nice.
You get like the schizo.
He's killing it.
Standard.
He's got 3 famous wives.
Yeah. That's true. Yep. 3 famous wives, and I blocked him on all of my social media. But he seems mostly harmless. He's just like, call me. And I'm like, I'm not going to call you. I'm never going to call you.
Did you say that you still manage your socials a lot? Because you said originally with your organization, that's what you were doing. So you're doing all the posting and.
Yeah. So my as far as YouTube, my editors are the ones who post on my YouTube. I don't really touch my YouTube at all. I probably problematically touch my YouTube sometimes. I probably should engage with it a little bit more. But yeah, I do my own TikToks, Twitch, Twitter, and Instagram. I do all those basically by myself. But I have a couple of people, like one person helps me like edit photos and stuff, or like just know how to pose. They'll give me feedback of being like, this is how you could make this photo slightly better, and then I'll retake the photo and stuff like that. So yeah, but I do it all for the most part by myself.
Wow. And through like analyzing the success and stuff of your content, are there other analytics you look at besides just views? Because I know you said that's not the like central piece of what you're focusing on. Like, do you look at like, is there any other data to analyze whether you're seeing like this video actually had an impact on people understanding men's mental health or things like that?
I mean, one thing to look at on YouTube is like watch time. Ideally, you want to see like longer watch times, especially for longer form content. So like if I've got a 2-hour video and the average watch time is like 15 minutes, like that's actually pretty good. So that would be one metric that you can measure by. There's a shitload of like SEO analytic stuff. I honestly am not very specialized in this. So I imagine there's a lot more that I could learn if I just like watched or like figured it out, but I don't really know. I mean, I get like anecdotes of people saying like, hey, your stuff has been super helpful. But that's selection biased anecdotes. So it's possible that for every one person who says, hey, you've been really helpful, there's like 5 who are like tried my advice and were like, this is really terrible advice. So it would be nice if I could get a metric for this, but how? Even if I put out a poll, it's still going to be a selection bias of those most involved, and probably those who most enjoyed my content are going to be the most motivated to give me feedback. So it's one of these things that are just hard to get data on.
Do you find it hard to balance like your IRL friendships with all these like online community people?
All of my IRL friends are very non-internet people. So the main thing would be like time. Just like making sure that I like book enough time. It's only hard to balance if I'm not being intentional, basically. But I would say that it's the same as like any other job. If you're not being intentional about like setting apart that time for your friends, then you're not going to see them. Especially like as you get older, most people have very scheduled life. So you can't just like, unfortunately, you can't be very spontaneous with a lot of your like, at least my IRL friends. I can't just be like, hey, I'm around. Do you want to hang out? That's a little bit trickier to do. So I think I just have to be intentional. And then they love hearing about internet world. They think internet people are the strangest little creatures on the planet, and they are extremely amused by the random stories. And I'll show them like messages and stuff that I get, and they just think the internet world is strange and exciting and interesting, but they also have no interest in participating in it. So yeah.
When did you do your first like stream / YouTube? You said it was on TikTok, right?
So my first live ever was on TikTok. Like December, maybe, or November, maybe, somewhere in there.
And what was that like? Did you feel like you were screaming into the void? Was it like very receptive, and you were like, let's ride this train until see where it goes?
I mean, the nice part of live is you get that immediate response. So like if you say some dumbass shit, your chat's like immediately going to respond to it. So that's kind of nice. I don't know. I'm the type of person, or like I just kind of adjust like pretty quickly. So like I had somebody like randomly recognize me in Missouri, which was like super random and cool. And everyone's like, how was that? Was that like a crazy experience? And I was like, no, I just normal, I guess, even though it's like not like it's not normal. I think I just like adjust pretty easily. I've done a ton of public speaking as well. So the live stuff it's kind of similar. I feel like I've been able to map it into my experience of public speaking, where like rather than like watching the crowd's like reactions as far as their facial expressions, their level of attentiveness, and like whether they're laughing or like nodding along, I kind of have like the chat to kind of gauge the level of interest with like how I'm speaking and stuff. So it's really similar to that. And then the debate parts have been like the really unique piece to this space that has been super. I really love it, but it's not for everyone. So yeah.
Did you do debate in like high school or college? Like, was that something you had a lot of experience with?
No, I've just always been a decently like disagreeable and opinionated woman who grew up in Fundy Christian land. So
oh yeah.
Yeah, so I debated people all the time in the past. as well, just because I've always had a lot of opinions. Um, so it's just been a nice place to vet because not everyone wants to debate you all the time. So it's been cool to kind of move into this space and have people who want to debate you all the time, which is fun.
So are you getting like chat messages all the time, like about people wanting to argue with you, or is it mostly other content creators?
Yes, it's more going to be panels and stuff that I'm talking about. Sometimes I'll do like call-ins where I like let people just come on and they can argue with me if they want to. But I find a lot of chatters when they come on, it's just very intimidating. Like if you don't have a platform and then you're debating somebody with like a decently like a somewhat moderately sized platform. I mean, there's just a big difference if you've like debated in a Discord versus having like, even if there's only like 20 people there, if there's 20 people listening, it's like more intimidating, right? Because you're being like socially evaluated. So I do more debates with like other content creators, just because the playing field I think is a little bit more level there.
And you say you really enjoy it, but do they ever get to the point where you're just like, oh, this is so annoying that, or like I'm not being able to like get any points in, or I mean, does it ever just get so frustrating you just want to turn off the stream?
Not turn off the stream, but I do unscream at them. There's definitely, you run into like bad faith actors who just like are actively not listening to you. I find that I'm like kind of aggressive enough that I can like usually cut in and like get what I want to say out. And I'm not in a panel. I'm not the person who feels the need to like talk a ton. I'm very content to kind of like listen for a while and then kind of like speak my piece when I'm ready to. So for me, as like as far as like talking time, I'm always kind of content to have like any amount of talking time. I don't feel like I need more or less necessarily. But yeah, it can be really frustrating talking to people who like, the biggest issues I run into is like people being bad faith. So like kind of like usually they're like lying to themselves about who you are. So they'll like convince themselves that you're like a really intense, aggressive, angry feminist. And then everything you say, they hear through like that lens and they'll just never actually engage with what you're saying. That or you'll deal with people who like deny reality. So you'll like just make a description about like how things are. You're not saying it's good or bad. You're just like, this is how people interact with this idea or this concept. And then people are like, no. And I'm like, what do you mean? Yes, this is obviously true. Like if you live in North America, this is obviously true. And then you'll like fight about reality. And I hate those fights. And then some people like to try to go into like an epistemic argument of being like, where do your ideas really come from? Like, what is the meta? Like kind of epistemic big idea. And I'm just like, nobody wants to fight about like epistemology. Like nobody cares. Shut up. So yeah, those are the main things I get frustrated by, being like, I don't want to have a epistemological fight with you about like determinism or any like of that bullshit. I don't care. I hate it. I hate tautological arguments of like explaining to people why categories like matter or exist. So like, what is a woman is like my least favorite argument, because it's like, it's a very tautological argument that both sides try to like, I just hate it. I just hate it on every level. It's such an annoying argument.
Looking forward, I know you said a lot of your goals are like just building a great community and like having these conversations, getting your information out there. What are like, in a perfect world, 5 years from now, like where do you see yourself as a content creator?
It's a really good question. I mean, 5 years from now, I'd like to be like done my master's, started my PhD, as far as like my dream, because I have like a dream, right? Like my career, I want to run since I was 19, I've wanted to run a treatment center for high risk youth. And I've been pursuing that dream like for the last 9 years. Like it's not a career goal. It's a dream. Like that's all it is. So I don't know where streaming fits into that. I always thought that I could help like 8 kids at a time in my treatment center. But with a platform this size, I have the possibility to like do really good and like help like 200, 400, 800 people, or do harm. And I still don't know quite how to manage that responsibility. I don't know what level of responsibility is mine and what level of responsibility is something that I shouldn't take on. So I'm kind of still trying to like navigate what that looks like for me at like a really deep kind of like, I guess, ethical level for me. And so I don't know where I want to be in 5 years, because I don't know how streaming precisely fits into like my long-term dream. And I fundamentally, the reality is like, I will pursue my dream over streaming. Like the treatment center matters more to me than streaming. And so like if I had to pick between one or the other, I would pick the treatment center every single time. Which is why a lot of people are like, you're going to probably not do school. And I'm like, there isn't a question that I'm not going to do. I've been pursuing this since I was 19. Nothing is going to get in my way of pursuing this dream unless I'm dead, or basically somebody says, there is no way you will ever be allowed to do what you want to do. It's not like something I would like to do. It's like the air I breathe. And so I don't know where streaming fits in with that. If it helps me accrue like money, so that I can purchase land, because land right now is one of the biggest barriers. I've got a number of contacts that are pretty interested once I get my master's, but I need like 100 acres. So
Oh, wow.
I don't have money for that. So like maybe that's where streaming fits in, is like as I'm helping men and mental health and dating and relationships, which I really like to do all these things too. Maybe this will help me accrue some wealth so I can like purchase land. Maybe all it's going to do is give me contacts and get me like connected to the right people who can like set me up with land in the future. I don't know what it's going to be. Maybe streaming will fit super, super well into like launching my career into like more of the psych education field and stuff like that. I don't know precisely where it's go. I just know like I really seem to love helping men and their mental health. I really like talking about dating and relationships. And I think there's not a lot of like balanced people talking about it. And it's in vain of helping people and like building community. So it's worth pursuing.
Why do you need 100 acres? Like, that's a lot of space for treating addiction, I guess.
As it's not for treating addiction, just to be clear. I want to work with high-risk teens doing wilderness therapy. I don't need precisely 100. I'm saying 100 is like a round number.
Gotcha.
Obviously, if like a land with like 24 acres came up that was like really ideally located and stuff, it's more about, so I want to work with teens as they're transitioning out of jail. In Canada, they typically get a certain number of therapy hours that's required, which pays maximal amount. And so I'm hoping basically to get some of those contracts of taking on teens that are more like high risk and immersing them in like a 6 month to 8 month kind of intensive at-risk youth program. So I want there to be like a teacher on site to like help their education. Education is like one of the best things you can do to prevent future criminal behavior. Most of them probably have like trauma and some heavy stuff. So I want like a psychologist on site to do like individual therapy. And then I want to provide, I've done wilderness therapy and like more volunteer avenues for a really long time. And then I've done more like clinical stuff with the same population of youth. And it's just like, I don't know, there's just something like magical that happens when you take like a gang banging youth who hates everyone, who thinks that like nobody's going to love him and he's mad at the world. And then you like put him on a horse bareback because he won't listen to you. And he's like kicking and screaming and his balls hurt because he's like sitting on this horse with like a very bumpy back. And he's like trotting along. And he's like, this stupid fucking horse. It can't do anything. And I'm like, you want to bet that it can't do anything? And then I can get on that horse. I can make it do some impressive shit because I'm a pretty good rider. And then I give it back and I say, listen to me or keep hurting. Like those are your two options here. And it's just like, it's just super cool to see like the changes that happen to these kids. Now, I'm not saying that this is the treatment that will fix every kid. But for some of the kids, there's some really interesting research on like nature and the experience of awe, and how a lot of like inner city kids typically never get to experience the emotion of awe, right? Like when you look at a tree or like a mountain or like a horse or whatever it is in nature, and you have this moment of like, holy shit, like this is huge and beautiful and I'm so small. And I'm kind of like, it's kind of unique and special that I get to like see this, right? These moments of like, I feel infinite. A lot of inner city kids like very rarely get to experience this. And I'm really interested to do research on how like the experience of like nature and awe and like wilderness can maybe create like major like change factors to shift behavior in young kids, in like teens.
Wow, that's really interesting. I really hope that happens.
Me too. Probably will. I've been pursuing it for so long that I can't see it not working out in some way. So
yeah. I've never heard of anyone just like making it at-risk youth's balls hurt to train them to not be traumatic.
Yeah, I mean, if I open my center, I was talking to the guy who's going to oversee my forensic study. I'll be the only one in North America that exists quite like I'm talking about, because I'm very empirical. Like I'm a big nerd, right? So I'm planning to implement like FIT and make sure that like my treatment is actually effective on every single individual child per session. Like I don't want to just like have a bunch of money and have like this beautiful idea, and then it in practice is like not that effective and very expensive. Um, but once I get specialized in what I'm getting specialized in, I'll be basically one of the only ones in Western Canada, where I'd be like a forensic adolescent clinical psychologist. There's basically like none of them. So there's a really big vacuum here. And I just love high risk teens. And the more angry, the more they want to like chase me with the axe, the more I love them.
So moving back just a little bit, what kind of things like motivated you to pursue mental health in general? I know you said that your mental health stuff helped inform your streaming career, but what really attracted you to like get into men's mental health and all this other stuff?
So I was planning to be a vet my whole life. And then right before I went to university, I started just, I'd worked with like troubled teens all through my adolescence. Not very legally. I was like camp counseling kids that were older than me half the time, which was a very strange situation.
Wow.
And yeah, there was times where I was like 15 and my like campers were like 17. And we would just be like, who knows how old I am to the kids. So I had like had a lot, I've been volunteering with like high risk teens since I was like 13. And so I was talking with some people, I think it was at church, and they were like, it's so cool that you want to be a vet. We put down our cat, and our vet like gave us this really nice card, and like it's just such a meaningful profession. And I remember thinking how lame that was, and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want my like greatest contribution to be like, my vet gave me a really nice card when my cat died. Like, no. And then I talked to a lot of vets, and they were like, honestly, if you love animals, and it's not the best profession, it's a really, really, really difficult profession. And at the time, I was taking a year off, and I was working with this lady who adopted a couple of FAS kids, 3 of them. And she was talking about animal assisted therapy. And I remember like a gong in my head being like, you're going to be an animal assisted therapist. I'm religious. So like I would attribute this to religion. Obviously, if you're an a-religious, you would attribute this to like, I don't know, whatever you want to attribute it to. My conscience being like, boom, this is it. But basically, I was like, okay, this is like a pretty big deal. I called a couple of my friends, didn't tell them that I was thinking about changing my degree. I just told them that I wasn't sure if I wanted to be a vet. My one friend was like, that's so weird. Why don't you be an animal assisted therapist? And I was like, wait, what? Like, do you know what that is? And she was like, I don't know. Do you like heal horses' hearts? And I was like, no, no, you don't heal horses' hearts. It's like using animals to help kids. And she's like, oh, that's way cooler. And I was like, yeah, how did you think of that? She's like, I don't know. It just like popped into my head. And then there's just like a couple of other things that happened that like made me be like, okay, like, I don't know if this is just coincidence. Obviously, I attribute it to God. It could have just been coincidence. It could have just been like, that's where my interest was going already because of my like previous history. But I basically switched my major, and just the more I learn about psych, the more I work with like high risk teens, the like more in love I fall with it. I've like spent almost 12 years working with high risk teens, and I still love them. I still love the job, which is a pretty good, usually burn out a little bit faster on teens. So it's a pretty good marker that it's, I'm well geared for it. So yeah.
Awesome. That's really inspiring. I love that. Last thing I wanted to explore, because a lot of people that are listening to this probably will not be too familiar with your content. I've talked a little bit about mental health stuff, but I wanted to talk a little more about the relationship side of things. So you said one of the things that you feel is a big obstacle is like men or women not understanding men. And I assume that, works vice versa, men not understanding women. So if you had to give like some just general advice on dating in the modern times, like to either men or women, what would you have to say?
General advice on dating.
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah.
I really think that, I guess I've realized this. I think the reason why we're all so obsessed with finding that person and dating and relationships is because I think we all know that fundamentally, if we like find that person or persons, that it's going to be the most important thing in our life. It's going to be like our simple happiness. And I really believe that like, for the most part, love is made, not found. I think there are obviously some prerequisites. I think you need to be attracted to each other, right? I think there needs to be some level of like mutual interests, personality overlaps that like make the relationship fruitful. There's a bunch of like specific advice I can give for like how to find that right person. I guess I would just say like relationships are really, really simple and really, really messy because in my view, like you've got like two universes intersecting and like trying to make things work. And I think best you can do, this is something like Nick and I agreed on when we very first started dating, which is that like we want at all times for both of us to just be trying. Like we, even if our feet are in the wrong direction, our heart should be in the right direction, which is like we want to try. And in my view, if we're both doing our best to outdo each other in love, that's probably a pretty good start. And so I guess that would be my best recommendation is to always be willing to try and try to find another person who's also willing to try. And somewhere in the midst of all that, some sort of crazy magic happens and you find joy. You find your joy as everything everywhere all at once would say, you find your joy. And it's the thing that matters most because you pick it. And hopefully you can pick somebody who picks you back.
Yeah, hopefully. Otherwise,
hopefully, yeah,
you'll be having 3 streamer wives who are all blocking you on social media. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Kyla, for doing this. We really appreciate you being on the show. And yeah, I think our audience will definitely get some great perspective from this interview.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate the interview.
Thanks so much for listening. I want to give a shout out to my sponsor, Media U, and my producer, Natalie Roman. And if you're interested in staying tuned for more podcasts, feel free to follow us on YouTube, or you can catch us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.